All right, thanks, Bertha. We are November 19th today.
Yes.
All right, so if you're watching the recording, we have some very special talk tonight. The chosen ones, we're going back to the chosen ones here. But it's weird because we see it backwards in my camera. It's showing backwards now, but you guys don't see it backwards on the camera. It's very strange. Very, very strange. And then there's another whiteboard over here that we'll be talking also about. It's sort of like improv health talk. So the topic tonight is the danger and comfort zone, where disease begins. Where disease begins, in other words, what one teacher calls the genesis of suffering, where that starts. That's a wild bull for a while, you know, just it's like taming a wild bull with all these people. You got like all these big fiery people in the same room. It's like, okay. So we're going to couple that with sort of elementary develop. Yeah, we got a paddle and everything tonight. I have a class series starting officially in January on the foundations of health. It's meant for a lay person or an advanced clinical person, and it's going to go. So I'm leading us into that December, the Wednesday group that I lead. There's an afternoon one, and I'm probably going to do an elementary evening one for an hour after that, like 7 to 8 or something. But what we're trying to do is get people to understand health is process. And so if we're talking about heating up, drying out, and using chemistry in the right context. So the example for the newcomers is you're running a race around a racetrack, and someone takes a photograph of you at a moment in time of running that race. And they present that photo to you and say that's in fact you. You would say they're nuts, wouldn't you? Right? Is the photograph of you running a race in fact you? No. That's called worshiping false idols, because that's what we're doing with chemistry. We identify with the snapshot. Your red blood cell count's low and your white blood cell count's low and your cholesterol's too high. And it's like, well, that's a process occurring in the body, and they're measuring chosen parameters at a moment in time. That's all chemistry is, and we've come to glorify these dead snapshots, which is the basis of medicine, is a study of cadavers and death. My 35 years in health has been the study of life and what's working to survive and live and thrive. I'm going to go to someone like me, thank you very much, because I want to live. I don't want to be poked around like a cadaver and a number. And now with genetic technology in our bodies, with questionable, conflicts of interest. Just a few conflicts of interest there, you know. So what we're going to do tonight then is I'm going to just start talking about the chosen ones. And that's periodic table of the elements, but we are the chosen ones, we're not, and then how do the elements affect our ability to be comfortable in our earth suit, which is our body, see? And so there's this is dedicated in part to Carrie Burr at Yoga Studio, because she had this little chart up and it was like, here's your comfort zone. You want to hang out in your comfort zone, right? Everything's hunky-dory and you feel safe all the time and you can expand and feel safe and trust and welcome. And then the opposite of that's like danger zone, right? And that's kind of what this chart over here shows. You got your danger zone, and that's like, yeah! And however that manifests for you, whether it's fear, anxiety, whatever. And so one generates a lot of breakdown of the body. That's called catabolism. And what you get, though, is the ability to run from the saber-toothed tiger. However, it doesn't exist. So there's a moment where the split, where the comfort zone, and there's a point between the comfort zone and the danger zone, right? And we used to call that disease. When we have a lack of ease in our being is the beginning of suffering. When there's a lack of ease, that's disease. Now I'm going to take a leap here because there's a couple of acupuncturists in the room. And so I call that wind. When there's a stillness of consciousness and the awareness can break through all the bullshit, the stories, and still remain aware, then that's a lack of identity, but it also doesn't generate a lot of conflict and wind or disharmony internally. And the Ayurvedics call that vata. Vata derangement, which I love that word. Vata derangement. It's one of my favorite things to say to people back in the day. I didn't really know much, but I thought it was a cool word. You have vata derangement. It just sounds like kind of cool.
Better than airplane.
I'm deranged today. Really scare people. I'm going to the deranged doctor, you know. Oh my God. So that point, one of my spiritual teachers likes to say, as soon as we break off from oneness into a me and an other and a noticing of a me and an other, that's the genesis of suffering. As soon as there's a me and another, and we're making a choice, that's the genesis of suffering. Ideally, there isn't a choice and we're flowing along in the flow of life. And when there's too many choices, our gallbladder meridian gets messed up, as I've seen over the years, because it's on the left and the right. When you got to go left or right and you can't decide which way to go, well, I got neck, shoulder, and hip pain, and that right hip in those ladies around gallbladder 30, 29, 30 area, boy, that's a big trigger area I found in my shiatsu practice. So it sort of dams up because the meridian likes to go like this, like a waterfall. And so if your hips are all tight, then the waterfall gets dammed up and the chi backs up into the shoulders and the head. There's always something every week. There's always something. So what we're trying to do, part of the basis of my practice and what I'm doing, is to harmonize the system and provide the means for harmony. And so there's not a lot of manipulation, because a lot of the basis of acupuncture is you release the constraint or the problem, and then the chi starts flowing. The same thing with the blood. You release the stagnant blood, then the blood starts flowing and everything's better. So in the mind, it's no different. We watched in one of my groups these higher conditions of health. And one of the higher conditions of health is fluidity. What do I mean by that? Emotional fluidity and mental fluidity. Why is that a higher state of health? This is where you can answer. Flowing, right?
No tension.
No tension. Present time, lack of resistance.
Stagnancy is disease.
In touch with source.
What'd you say?
In touch with source.
In touch with source. So there's all these words, and clarity is another one. Discerning and clear versus judging and foggy. Remember, that's kind of the basis of everything I teach right now is in the Ayurvedic people and the acupuncturists know, if you have discernment, that means you have light, means you have fire. When there's darkness, you can't see very well, but when there's light, you can. So that's discernment. And the state of discernment involves no judgment, no polarity, no tension at all. It's just knowing the facts. There are chicken livers in this cup in front of me here, and that's discerning. The judgment would be, oh, I hate chicken livers. Dad made me eat them. That's judgment, right?
Thank you.
Full of all kinds of drama, right? But I'm a drama queen, so I'll sit there with the drama with the best of them. Just having fun with it, right? It's like this to me. This is all like an improv class now. It's like I'm sitting in improv class, we're having improv, and hey, what are you doing over there? And it's way more fun that way. So there are certain elements that facilitate our discernment and being able to stay clear, and there are certain that do not. And so when you do all these chosen ones back here, so on the periodic table of the elements, what's C?
Copper.
That's Cu.
Oh.
Carbon.
Carbon, very good. What's oh, I gave it away. Hi, what's H? What's hydrogen? Hydrogen?
Hydrogen's H.
What's the O?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. What's the S? Sulfur?
Oh, sulfur.
Sodium's Na, so that really messes you up. And what's the N? Nitrogen. So this is from John Stewart or Peter Stewart's book, The Chemistry of Essential Oils, subtitle, God's Love Manifest in Molecules. So he is a bridge like me of the woo-woo to the hard sciences. You gotta love a guy that writes a book called God's Love Manifest in Molecules. It's attached to a chemistry book. I mean, I just love this guy. And so I'm gonna be teaching a class based on this guy's book, because that's why I understood chemistry as process. That's what he was saying. He says, in reality, our cells aren't looking at chemistry at all. Our cells are reading frequency. Let me repeat that. Our cells are not looking at chemistry at all. They're reading frequency, of which can be translated to chemistry. But it's back to energy. Energy precedes form. We all know that. It's so simple, but we get lost in all these concepts and we're fed all the 5 sense, what David I call it? The 5 sense sort of suffering, we get attached in our 5 senses. And David Icke has some whole things about how he has a whole reptilian thing. This is hilarious, but the reptilians, there was this one image they had of Obama, like a picture of Obama, and they had airbrushed in this reptilian entity behind him. And that's what he sees, are these reptilians behind the real people. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if that's really happening, or it's just, he's making a big show for us, And he's quite a performer, Mr. Icke, So I thought it was funny though. Like I've seen auras and things around people, but I've never seen reptilians behind people before. Is anybody here?
Not yet.
You ever seen a big crocodile or a Tyrannosaurus Rex figure behind somebody?
No.
I did
Huh?
see the right drugs.
Right, drugs, yeah, right.
In lots of dreams. I saw
Dreams.
a monk- I saw a monk that took a snake's face.
Snake's face, okay.
Wow.
A monk. It was a monk. I was 21 years old first time. It was crazy.
So there are various things that when I do eye gazing with people, I've had numerous times people have, I've had people turn into things, and I've turned into things, including snakes and leopards and tigers, and it's way more fluid. Yeah, I could so many stories of eye gazing. What happens to people, just melt into the floor, like, oh, you can see right through me. Which was we saw The Peaceful Warrior the other night. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman, based on true story. And I met him when I was 25 down in San Luis Obispo. After he wrote The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, it changed my life. And I gotta meet this guy, book signing, and he comes up and shakes my hand and he looks through me, not at me. And it was terrifying and wonderful at the same time, realizing somebody is that enlightened, or done their work enough that I'm transparent to them. It was like being naked, like, whoa, this is kind of uncomfortable, but cool at the same time, And I had a few more people in my 20s where it's like I was transparent to them, and I realized I can't hide anything from this person. I can't hide a thing. I've had about 10, 20 of those in my life where, okay, just try and think good thoughts, because because I'm visible to them. And being that naked is the place from which we find our power.
Yeah, it's great.
You cannot be vulnerable unless you know your power. And that's what I'm always fishing for. Poke at people, poke at clients, poke at family. If you can't take my pokes and offer me vulnerability back, then I'm not interested in you. And I tell my men in my manuscripts, I'm not interested in all the great things you're doing either. I'm more interested in your vulnerable truth and your emotional truth than I am all this great resume of stuff you think you're doing. That doesn't matter at all to me anymore, because it's about safety and trust moving forward in the world. And a big resume, right, Ian, doesn't, big money and houses and doesn't mean crap to my heart. I mean, I'm going to trust if you got a big house with a big gated community around you. That tells me you are just you're not being vulnerable. We don't even lock our doors sometimes. Well, that shouldn't be on film. We got to delete that. Hey, folks, come to our house. We don't lock our door. Just announce it to the world on Zoom. Good thing Gene and Bernie aren't in the room.
Address is.
Right.
Wow.
My other housemates aren't in the room right now, so I won't get yelled at.
Have you ever looked up your own name and seen if it's online? Most people's addresses are listed online. My address is listed online.
Well, I know mine is because I'm on, 15 venues,
And I don't
LinkedIn,
even
and all
know
that
what
stuff.
address
So anyways, we'll move back to the chosen ones in perception. So the center of this chart over here, there's perception and interpretations and clarity. So in any event, you can have, as a surfer, you can have 100 guys in the water and then have a set of waves come through, and you'll hear 100 perceptions of how the day was, right? The guys who catch the waves are having a great day. The guys sitting over in the channel, not so great, right? And William Faulkner was my hero when I was in English in college. Faulkner wrote this book where it was the same story about this house, but he told it from like 10 people's different perspectives. So it's the same story told from 10 different characters' perspectives. And they all had a way different take on the same story, right? So that's interpretation and perception of reality. So I would ask you all to think about, I have a lot of perceived abandonment in my life. Perceived abandonment. And stories about how I've been, but have I been abandoned? Probably not. I mean, a few times going surfing, as you know, like if you're not the cool guy when you're teenagers, I got left behind a lot. So it was like, yeah, you know who those guys are. Like, Ian remembers. So it's like, yeah, I'm not cool enough to go surf with these guys, but that's okay, you know. But now it's okay now. It wasn't then. It was like, oh, shame. What's wrong with me? I don't surf good. I don't have a good conversation. I don't get stoned, you know, whatever at the time. But it wasn't abandonment. It was what I call now a flavor unmatch. Sometimes you don't have a flavor match. Sometimes you're a square peg and they're a round hole and they don't want, you know, it's just an energetic configuration issue. I had a friend that she had come to, I used to lead these day retreats in San Luis Obispo in college 20, 25 years ago. And this young lady would always come. And she was always the one questioning me and challenging me. And she didn't know very much, but she knew enough to like poke. So it was like seeing myself out there. I was like, oh. So we got to know each other over the years, and then we're never romantic. And then one day she just calls me up and randomly she's like, hey, I'm single. You want to come down and spend the weekend together? I'm like, that's random. And it was very businesslike. And she's like, but I have to look at your astrology first. So I give her my astrology, my birth date and whatnot. And then she calls me back a day later and she goes, it's off. She goes, we have the worst configuration ever. We would beat each other's throats the whole time. And I was like, I trust you, because I don't want to drive all the way down there and spend, you know, a night together and be like, ah, you know, just over. We're not even in love with each other, you know. It's like what would that be? Would it be a fling? But it was so business-like. It was almost like a little business meeting too, you know. One nighter business meeting. Okay, I'll sign the contract here, and you know. So,
What sign she was?
pardon?
What sign was she?
I don't remember now. But I don't generally like. I'm a Taurus and Taurus and Cancer. So the fire signs and the air signs generally lose interest with me because I'm pretty a simplistic person at heart. I present differently because I have all the stuff in the Aquarian house. They say, you know, all this Earth stuff, and it's all in the Aquarian house. You're a freaking contradiction unto yourself. Yeah, that's me.
You're a Taurus sun and a what?
Taurus sun, Taurus moon, Cancer ascendant, Taurus and Saturn, Venus and Taurus. But Mercury's in Aries, so there you go. See, so Aries is communication. I got that fucking fire sign. I've already thought of 10 things where you thought of one, probably, you know. It's nuts inside this nut house in here, you know. Trying to manage a freaking inferno. Talk about fire. So what manages fire then? There's the question. What element manages fire in the 4 elements?
Water and earth.
The acupuncturists better know that one, right? Water controls fire.
Water.
Water.
Earth will also control fire, right? Because you can throw mud on, or you can throw dirt on fire and put it out. But in the Chinese 5 element sort of clock, they have water controls fire in their little star thing in the control cycle. So, and what feeds fire? You can't answer, you know.
Wind.
Wind does. The acupuncturist can't answer. Because you already know. What is an aspect of earth, but in Chinese medicine, they don't have an earth element. Wood. Wood. So in wood, that's water becoming real. One teacher called it plasma energy. It's
Wood is water becoming real?
right. Your sprout is in the water under the soil in the dark. And then the sprout growing in all directions is wood element energy in my world. The roots growing down and the top growing up, and it's expanding rapidly. That's wood element energy. One teacher called it plasma energy. I don't know. I can't conceptualize that, so I don't know what to say. Maybe our acupuncturists have something to say though. Krista, you have something to say about wood element?
About
How you see it as cosmologically or in
water makes wood real. I like that. Yeah, wood is the energy of spring and the energy of the clear general who can see and make decisions and manage people really well and not be overbearing. Like wood out of balance, you think of like someone who drinks too much alcohol and they are fire, you know, they have a temper. They try to overpower other people rather than delegate with grace and clarity. But it's got a lot of growing, you know, there's a lot of strong energy in wood, obviously, that we see with trees. And when in the spring, we see everything burst forward. And that's what Craig is talking about, how water makes wood real, because we need the moisture of the winter and the moisture of the snow and the rains for wood energy to create.
Thank you. Wow. That is, the general is a good one. So on the medicine wheel, the direction of the north, or the sovereign, or the king and the queen, or the hawk energy is sort of like that. Can you fly high enough metaphorically to see yourself objectively enough to manage your own kingdom? And so the beneficent general isn't necessarily the king, because the general is acting for the king, but where would you put the king, the sovereign, in the 5-element chart? I don't know, maybe under water. It's quite interesting, because it's a bigger view.
Yeah,
but
the kidneys probably.
kidney, right? Because our sovereign, the queen for the women and the king for the men, or for the
Could be fire.
transgender, we'll just call them sovereign, their sovereign self, to be PC tonight. But there's this part of ourselves it's like the camera panned way out, and then the warrior energy is the camera panned down to just the mouse, because the mouse can only see right in front of itself, right? And that's the classic military person, right? They only know what they're told to do. They don't know the big picture why. And they want that, right? The generals want that, because they don't want them questioning bad orders. Just do what you're told, right? That's mouse or rabbit or down on the earth energy, pinpointed. And we were talking about this in the natural law class. That's one of the energetic breaths, is down to a point and as big as the universe. And this was in, Julie Henderson wrote this book called The Lover Within. You'd probably like it, Cindy. And it was based in Tantra, but she goes into these things, these exercises where you can make yourself as small as an atom and as large as the universe. And then you can be, the next breath is the density. You can be as diffused as air, or as dense as a black hole. And you can be as big as the universe and dense, or as small as an atom and be dense, or the opposite. You play with that. And then the final energetic breath is your relationship to a center, or the top and the bottom. So we're on this planet called Earth, and we have a relationship of top bottom in relation to the planet, right? So you can go up and down to a relative field of center to top. And if you play with that, as I have, my example in natural law class was, I've been practicing this for a long time, because I studied Castaneda long ago, and how to sort of be an urban shaman. And so I was walking by this person at the farmer's market, and as I like to mess with people, so they were probably from me to Drew, maybe 10 feet, walking towards me. I knew they hadn't noticed me, so I just locked eyes on them. And then I panned the camera out, and I have this I don't exist energy. I'm walking with this I don't exist energy. And I'm looking at them like there's an entity behind me looking out at me, but I'm not really there. I'm sort of vacant and disassociated. And they're walking and they're looking in my direction, but it was like I was a phantom past. Then I texted them a few hours later. I said, "Hey, just see me at the farmer's market." "Oh," I go, "Fuck, I walked right by you." And they were like, "Wow." And that's an example of, you can play with this and get yourself out of bad situations sometime. I mean, I've had cops pull me over one time, and I just looked at the cop with the baby blues when we were younger. He's like, "You round that corner real fast." And I did this, like, use the force thing. I go, "I was just rounding the corner in a respectful way." And he repeated that back to me. He goes, "Yes, you were just rounding the corner in a respectful way. You can go on your way now." I was like, "How did I do that?" Chris Molnar was with me. He's like, "How did you do that?" And I didn't do anything. I just channeled that, and I looked into the guy's eyes. I looked into the cop's eyes. That was the key. And I found his humanity. I think that's what got me off the hook, was looking into this person's eyes and seeing them as a human, not a demonic authority figure, because we had a lot of fuck authority stuff with punk rock, Whew. Wasn't there a song, Fuck Authority?
Oh, probably 5 or 6 of them.
Exactly. And punk rock slam dancing, "Fuck authority," and stage diving, and oh my God, those days. But I digress. So what I'm trying to focus on is how nutrition, if we don't eat well, then we have this fog bank internally, and then we miss stuff, and we might miss that an opportunity arose for us. Like somebody new came in our life, and we're running down the freeway of life at 90 miles an hour, and we miss this opportunity, this person that magically presented itself, or the situation. Then that would be someone who's too fiery, right? They're going too fast. Someone who's too cold would go too slow, right? Things that are enzymes slow down in cold, and enzymes speed up in heat, right? Generally, we do, we to a point, then there's too much heat, then your enzymes all explode from the heat, right? And so the chosen ones, then, if you notice the common link between all those elements, C, H, O, S, and N, is they're all acid forming. So all your carbohydrates, if you reverse carbohydrate to hydrocarbon, fat And carbohydrates are hydrocarbons because in their pure state, all they are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's a long string of Lego elements. And that's all pure fat and pure sugar is. And carbon makes carbonic acid, hydrogen makes hydrochloric acid, it's a very reactive element, and oxygen is a very reactive, you get reactive oxygen species with oxidative damage. So that's why we have what's called trace minerals or alkaline minerals. Because if we get acidic, then we get very irritated, right? Acidity equals irritation and fire and heat. So acid is fire, alkaline would be cold on some level. Very loose translation though. So let me look at our trace minerals. So what are the four main in the, for those of you that study lab work, this might be elite, but there's four major alkaline minerals that are usually on labs except for one of them. What are the four major alkaline minerals to buffer all that acidity? And this is why you want whole foods and whole sugar and not refined sugar, and why you want natural raw fats and not refined fats, because you're putting hydrocarbons in your body, you're causing an acid reaction and you're pulling all the alkaline minerals out of your bones to buffer that acid in the blood. Because the blood has to be maintained in a very, very narrow pH range. The blood is never acidic by definition. But you understand that. It goes 7.35, 7.45. That's the narrow range you can fluctuate in. So where the fuck is acid blood in cancer? It's ignorance is what it is. People don't know what the fuck they're talking about. We have pH compartments in our body. The stomach should never be alkaline. Never. It needs to be acidic to break down protein and minerals. The small intestine is the only place in the body that's actually technically really alkaline. The blood 7.35 is neutral, you know, but the body uses the bones to keep that regular, right? So the bones and the tissues suffer so the blood can stay pure. And so these other trace elements then, let's see, quiz time. Monica's one in my team, so. All right, Monica, you're enjoying the spot. What are those four elements? Four main alkaline elements. Calcium, there you go.
Magnesium.
Magnesium,
very good.
Sodium.
Well, it's got magnesium.
Sodium.
Sodium.
Yeah.
And what's sodium's antagonist?
Vinegar?
Chlorine?
It's in all fruits and vegetables.
Oh, chloroform? No.
Potassium?
Yes.
Potassium.
Potassium.
Yeah.
Sodium is.
So think of a teeter-totter, and sodium and potassium. See, sodium's outside the cell, potassium's inside the cell. There's a teeter-totter, and that variation of sodium and potassium causes a slight electrical gradient through the cell. And that's loosely correlated in hair mineral analysis as life force or adrenal force or kidney yang. And so you want to have a certain ratio of sodium potassium in your hair when you cut it and put it into the lab. And that's what the main marker of vitality. And it works. I've been doing this for 10 years. So if you're doing your blood pressure check and you're lying down, your blood pressure is a certain level, and then it drops 20 points when you stand up, and your sodium potassium ratio is 1 and it should be 2.5, you have severe adrenal fatigue, no matter what the doctors say. Because we don't defer to Rockefeller medicine in my life, not ever, unless you got a broken neck or something and you need them. But outside of that, you know, these people are studying death and they don't even understand this. How do you measure life force? You know, it's hard. The acupuncturist does he did the pulses, and a friend of mine does morphogenic field muscle technique. So he does muscle testing with your field, like kind of your pendulum, Jonty. He'll bring in a product and he gets a sort of a set point. Okay, your field's out to here. And then he'll come in with a product and your field will shrink if the body doesn't want it. And your field get bigger if the body wants the product. Rick Valentine, this guy's a master. I send people to him to prioritize if they're, okay, I got 8 things going on. So Rick, will you muscle test and see where the fuck the priority is in your system here? Morphogenic field technique, it's called. Very, you know, like we all have a field around us, right? So these alkaline minerals are what sort of buffers this acidity and this heat. And so sodium and potassium have a relationship, and calcium and magnesium have a relationship. Zinc and copper have a relationship. So a lot of these elements, if you do too much of one, you imbalance the other part. And guess what regulates calcium, magnesium? Well, there's a calcium phosphorus ratio. So let's go to that for a second, because if you get too much calcium in your body and you calcify, that's like stage 5 of a degenerative spiral. It starts with inflammation or trauma or injury. And then calcification is like, when I hear calcification from somebody, it's like, oh shit, you missed 5 steps prior to that. You missed the early warning signals that I teach. A lot of my clients go, God, I wish I would have met you 20 years ago. I'm like, yeah, but you know, your soul contract is different, right? On whatever level here. So if you do too much sodium, then you imbalance potassium, so to speak. But then there's another element here to the wisdom of the body, and it's called transmutation. Transmutation, transmutation. There's even a book called Biological Transmutations. I've spoken about it a few times. So they did this experiment with people. They would feed them salt tablets and go out into the desert and then measure their urine potassium. So they're feeding them sodium tablets, but they're peeing potassium out after being in the desert for hours and hours and hours. They're not intaking any potassium. The body's transmuting sodium to potassium by need of severe heat and dehydration, right? And silica, cows and chickens don't eat calcium-rich foods, folks. They eat silica-rich foods in the grasses. And silica transmutes to calcium by the bacteria in their stomachs. Another little secret that you guys won't know on the call, Krista, they don't teach you acupuncture either, but we actually have two stomachs. We have what's called an enzyme stomach that Edward Howell found, and we have that's the upper part of the stomach. And so when you eat raw food, it sits in this little, like a bird pouch, and it just digests itself, including raw meat. Raw meat has an enzyme that digests itself. So it can smell like kingdom come, but if you haven't cooked raw meat yet, it's not really bad technically. Because enzymes are breaking it down. That's what the smell is. They asked some pygmy, this is from Weston Price. They asked some pygmy why they were eating like 4-day-old rotting elephant meat. And the white people are like, oh, and the pygmies are like, we don't eat the snow. It was a delicacy to them. I saw another one. There was fermented monkey brains. They actually ferment the monkey brains, then put it back in the skull, and here you go. Creamy fermented monkey brain noodles. God, wrong.
Looking forward to that for months.
That was in Indiana Jones, wasn't it? Wasn't there an Indiana Jones?
Sounds familiar.
Isn't that one of those? Yeah, that's right.
Tastes like mushrooms or something is what I heard.
Mushrooms. Boy, mouthful. Anybody eating brains in here? Anybody?
Cow brains.
I was offered brains. I think
A few people had
declined.
brains.
Yeah, it tastes like creamy and fatty.
Fatty, okay.
Yeah, they were not fermented though.
They weren't
Not
fermented.
fermented.
Anybody else have a brain story? What it tastes like?
Carson eats brains. In fact, he was getting chicken heads. The farmer's market, they're gonna start selling chicken heads here.
Nice.
Talking about cooking them for the brains.
You need to sell hearts.
really
I
good
wish they would
stuff.
sell the hearts.
I can't remember. I think
Brains.
Yeah.
My cat eats the head first of everything.
Right.
It's the brain, it's the brain.
And it's raw.
Yeah.
I saw this dog catch this this mole living up in the mountains, and it ate the tail first,
Oh,
and then it ate the head last, and then it went into this orgasmic epileptic seizure when it ate the brain. I heard this crunch, and then it went. I'm like, I've never seen anything like that. What was that? It was some orgasmic fit from some juices in the brain,
I'll have what he's having.
Yeah, I want a mole now. Oh my God. You ever seen the runs of the anchovies in the water? What are they called?
Runyon.
The runyon?
What are they called that?
Runyons?
Runyon run.
The runyon run.
That's what I remember.
The little teeny fishes that come every now and then?
Grunion.
Grunions, thank you, the grunion. Grunions.
Go run out and grab them and put them.
So I was down at Its Beach, I hear up by the lighthouse. A couple of years ago, I was dating this woman that was really into meat and stuff. So she runs down the water and grabs one of the fishes and starts popping them in her mouth like candy. So and I'm all, oh, this chick is hardcore. I like this girl. And she started like becoming a child, and she was glowing, and I'm like, I gotta take it, so I ate a couple, and I literally changed. I was so full of joy. It was like the fish joy went right into me, and I was like,
Wow, there's all
It's
my
the whole
bucket list
thing.
I
now.
brought a bucket of those home to my cat one time. He loved them,
Ah.
but I haven't seen them in years. It's
me
just
either. I think the
like-
pollution or something,
Well, they were raging like 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah. Big time. They were really going. So they'll probably be back.
So we should have a
Get your
we should have a
buckets ready.
grunion party. I'll run down there and start popping them.
Yeah.
Woo! Start to get all drunk on raw fish. And have brain orgasms like the animals. Oh my God. Every week is like this, you guys. So it's like it's all freak show of laughter. Okay, back to the minerals. So iron got brought up. So on the slide over here, the whiteboard, excuse me,
It's great.
it's my loose with words thing.
The text line.
Down here, as I've shown iron, but iron needs control elements. So iron needs magnesium and copper to control it. So magnesium and copper control oxygen and iron. The basis of all oxidative stress starts at the level of the mitochondria in the body, is Morley Robbins' contention in the root cause protocol. So I'm about 5-6 years in with study with this group. This guy's a gnarly scientist, and he outed himself about drinking coffee every day, which I love because he's totally into metabolism, and he's an out kind of guy, but he just won't give up his coffee. So he says he goes to Starbucks and has a 3-hour session where he drinks coffee and just studies all this stuff. And he's sharp, this guy. I know. We love you, Morley. I love this guy and his team, the root cause protocol. So my old girlfriend, Noelle Noli, turned me onto this, which she's one of those people that would just check something out and go, you need to look at this. And she always knew. And so I looked at this guy's work and I was like, oh my God, because I wouldn't know how even the alternative medicine conspiracy is causing hypoxia in the population. Vitamin D3 messes with copper metabolism. Ascorbic acid messes with copper metabolism. Zinc messes with copper metabolism. HCQ messes with copper metabolism, which causes hypoxia and oxidative stress. When copper and magnesium can't manage oxygen and iron, that's the beginning of oxidative stress. And we don't have one mitochondria per cell. Your brain cells have like 10,000 mitochondria per cell. We've been lied to about that. So different heart cells have like 1,000. So depending on if they're very, very metabolic, they have a lot of mitochondria. And magnesium is involved in every single reaction where we get energy. And Morley terms it the magnesium burn rate. So like I got some toe cramps earlier. And you know why? Too much caffeine today. It sped up my metabolism. I burned off all my magnesium, and it starts with the small muscles. And if you don't listen, it goes to the big muscles. The eyes are usually first, the small twitchy toe muscles. And if you don't listen to your magnesium needs, then the twitch will get into the bigger muscles. And yes, there are nerve spasms. There are bone spasms. There are blood vessel spasms. You can see them in the iris through these little rings called cramp rings. And we don't even know about this stuff. I never even thought that we could have a blood vessel cramp, but we can. We know about muscle cramps. We can have a nerve cramp. They're not like what we think they are, but it's sort of a disharmony. I believe it's called wind for the acupuncturists. Like we call that wind, like internal wind, right? They'd have the whole, so Michael Tira said something which was very valuable to me because he's an acupuncturist. And he said, we have all this wisdom that was given to us from thousands of years ago, but we have to make it work in the modern world because the way it was taught doesn't work in the modern world. And I agree with him 100%. We have to take all these pointers at natural law, right? That's why I teach a natural law class. It's one phenomena occurring around us, and we have all these names for it. So let's get it right and understand the process and fuck the names. Because when you experience heat, you know it. You get it forever. When you experience cold, you know it. You experience dryness, you know it. And what does dryness manifest as in the body? What does excessive dampness manifest as? What does heat manifest as? Which organs does it affect? There's my life study, 30 years. I was telling Cindy earlier, I'm a human test tube. I've been trying out all kinds of strange combinations of herbs and stuff. And Bernie was my husband was saying they're trying comfrey. They thought it was borage, and they pureed it up and drank the juice, and they had diarrhea. It's slippery. And so when you do too much slippery herbs, the food slides right through you. I'm like, you want to, but that's a test tube thing. I tried in Michael Tira's herbal course, over 3 years, I tried over 500 herbs. Probably had diarrhea 100 times in 3 years. You're like, there's that herb again, flush. So I'll lay down for a couple hours, I'll lay in bed twitching, and I don't want to do
How much quantity to get that result?
sometimes
Just a little
I
bit.
have a
Usually
teaspoon.
costs you.
Half a teaspoon.
Sorry.
You got the herbs?
I got a whole room full over there, bro. Which, talking about discernment and clarity, so when the colon's backed up, Ian's new to this conversation, so all the blood vessels in the intestines go to the liver first, and we're not taught that. They're called the hepatic portal veins. So if this gets blocked, you know, if you got this sieve, sort of all the fluid, all the protein and carbohydrates and the minerals are all going over here to the liver and these blood vessels. Well, the diameter of that blood vessel is supposed to be like that, and it's actually that. Then the intestines get backed up, and you get this fluid thing where the gut sticks out.
Those blood vessels are called
Hepatic portal veins.
portal veins. That's-
And this is the basis of why the coffee enema is such a great cancer therapy, because when these portal veins get a bunch of sludge in them, they have no word for that, but that to me is the predecessor of arteriosclerosis.
Mm.
The plaque in the blood vessels is preceded by plaque in the portal veins. And what lives in plaque, rotting plaque? Pathogens.
Yeah.
So here you have the COVID problem is you have viruses in my world are nothing more than protein fragments that have developed some kind of intelligence, and they're sort of half dead, was a bunch of my teachers had taught me. And so you have these half dead molecules that get some kind of intelligence. And here's what's really insidious about the modern age is radio frequency emissions that are in these cell towers. Candida loves it. Candida loves radiation, and Candida loves heavy metals. So somebody has a Candida problem, by definition, then they have dead cells in their body, too much rot, and they have heavy metal problem. Because what does yeast do in nature? What's fungus's job in nature?
Decompose.
Decompose it.
Break down, break apart.
Like the dead trees, right? They got the rotting mushrooms on them and whatnot. So you don't blame the fungus for your problem. If you have a fungus problem, you have too much rot.
Something's dying.
You have too much rot inside yourself. And there's the body odor problem. Oh, deodorant, and I'll perfume over bullshit. Right?
Deodorant.
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 I'll just perfume over bullshit, you know. And I had a girlfriend that said it to me once because I had an emotional layer over me, and she would see right through it. And she goes, "You can't perfume over shit, Craig. You don't want to be with me right now." And she would see right through it. I was like naked in front of this woman. I couldn't hide anything for 4 years. Not one thing. If I had any aberrant thought, she was on it. Like, what's going on over there? So I grew a lot as a human being, but it wasn't easy at times, you know. And that's good that we have people reflecting that to us, isn't it?
Yes.
It's
Oh, yeah.
tougher,
Teachers.
but that's what relationships about. Like, oh, here's that reflection. Oh, I don't like myself very much over there.
But the value of community, get feedback.
Yeah.
New perspective.
Oh, where am I going with this? What time is it? I'll come up for air here for a minute, like out of the channel mode. So we're back to this metabolism thing and how it relates with this danger zone. So if we have perceived trauma, are we going to be more wanting to control our environment?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So could it be, I've been questioning this for a long time. This is the basis of, you know, Byron Katie, the work, meditative self-inquiry. You know, how would I feel without that thought? Oh, what do I get out of that thought? You know, it's like, oh, well, I feel much better now. You know, like now it can you overuse, it goes into spiritual bypass, which, you know, Ajahn spends a lot of time talking about spiritual bypassing, and I have a PhD in that from 3 years of with a girlfriend. We talked about ourselves in third person, for God's sakes. There is sadness in Craig today. Remember the Seinfeld where George is talking about himself? George is getting mad. You talk about yourself in third person. That's pretty disassociative state, wouldn't you say? So one of my spiritual teachers at the time, it was Moki. Moki got mad at me. It was like 2001 or 2. He was like, "Will you just say I statements, please? You're really sickening us in the room here." Was that he goes, "We all know it's a convention of language. So you have to trust now, Craig, that you're going to fall asleep in life." Because I was hyper vigilant. I don't want to fall asleep. I'm dangerous when I'm asleep. You know, and then he's like, "You're going to have to let yourself fall asleep. It's part of life. And trust you're not going to cause harm when you're asleep at the wheel." Because everybody falls asleep at the wheel all day, every day, throughout the day. The only difference between people is, you know, how much you're up for air and how much you're in the swamp, right? That's the difference between all of us. You know, if you're down in the swamp a lot, then you're reacting, right? Your instinct, reaction, trigger, that's not awakeness. That's eyes open, but asleep at the wheel. And I have an exercise for that. We talk about in the natural law group is there's this timer on your phone you can get. It's randomity. It's a random timer. You get the random timer app and you set it and then it randomly goes off. And then it's called a personal inventory. I used to do this. And you check in with yourself. What was I thinking when the timer went off? What was I feeling? What was I doing? And most importantly, was I awake or conscious or not? Was I choosing? The definition of conscious, I was choosing, or I was really hyper aware of what I was doing. And so it was because of Noelle, actually, I did this because I was calling myself very awake, and she just shut me down as a client. She goes, "You're barely half awake." And I went, "Wow, I don't like this woman." And so I did the personal inventory, and she was right. I was only about a half to maybe 70% awake in the day. With, you know, after 100 data points over the course of a few weeks, you know, random timer going off. So I did it Hong Sa, it's the old Yogananda mantra called Hong Sa. So I programmed that into the timer. They go Hong, next time it goes out, the Sa, Hong Sa. So I got a smile every time it went off too. Double bonus. What are you gonna do, Yogananda? So that's the humility part, right? Is we're not as awake as we are. What's that image we were talking about? The elder male has this image of himself as the, you know, what, were we talking about that?
I was the one, yeah, the great cartoon, the man looking in the mirror and a woman looking in the mirror, both towards 60. The woman looking in the mirror actually looks okay, but she sees herself as a old, decrepit woman. And the guy has a belly and balding and not so good, but he sees himself as
All that.
Yeah.
all that.
And look what just happened. And the light got brighter. Or lights flicker in the room here occasionally. And the spirit just lit that light up. Isn't that true?
Whoa.
That's true. Oh, we're dim again.
The best laugh about it.
You best laugh about it.
Say it again, see if the light changes.
Well, the biggest key of it is that it's weird, but women being forced to care about our looks more, we're healthier.
Yeah.
Because it
Mhm.
forces us to be healthier, to
Yeah.
be thinking about, you know, making sure that we got the look that we want because of the stupid way that the world is set up. But
Right.
until we get married, we live longer than the
Until you-
women live less time than their
Oh,
husbands.
darn it.
But
But the men probably live longer in
Oh, I
marriage,
feel
right?
so fortunate.
women live longer
When they're not married.
when they're not married.
Do men live longer when they're married?
Yeah, well, then by comparison. they-
See, so
they
men parent.
suck the life
Yeah, they
out of
suck the
us.
life out of women and take it into themselves.
Okay.
When did the light come on? I said, oh, that's so true.
Yeah, and and I think he said something like you were mad about
You were mad about it, and
I
then
wasn't
and then
mad.
lights went.
That's
"Oh."
what-
Just more
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm not mad, just, yeah.
The light reflecting.
So this is back to the reflection time. Is if you, I believed I had perceived abandonment. So what I did was I started, you know, looking into the reflection in the world, and it was like, oh, I wasn't. These are all perceptions due to my own, shall we say. When I was about 6 months old, I was in the crib and I looked at my hands, and I had this moment of like feeling like an unlimited soul now in this tiny little raisin of a body. I was wiggling my fingers going, oh God, what's happened? I didn't realize it was going to be like this kind of moment when I was like 6 months old. And that's kind of like, you know, it's like, and then we learn how to use the equipment better, of course, you know.
And that's a big step up from birth.
That's a perceived trauma, though, a separation from a source, right? There's the perceived abandonment is I chose to come here on some level. What the fuck? I abandoned myself. You know, you see what I'm saying?
That you had to start over.
I had a moment like that.
Starting over.
We
That, yeah.
forgot we had to start over.
It's like, oh shit, I gotta start over. I don't remember anything. Ah, fuck.
Well, there's more and more that don't have to. Get in it. Well, look at the little ones. They're
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, they're coming in pretty awake these
Right.
days.
Yeah.
So bright.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, take a
Like,
closer. And in
Beyond
fact,
the
just
indigo?
Sweet young ancient
beyond, way
ones.
beyond.
Really?
And try telepathic talking to them.
Really?
It's so fun. You really can get a response. It's very cool.
They're seriously connected.
We also, whenever you speak to an infant, make sure you wait at least 30 seconds to watch for the response. Sometimes 2 minutes. They will respond. We understand fully our mother tongue in 5 months in utero. So we come out fully capable of understanding everything. So this bullshit that, oh, it's just a baby doesn't know. That's where all the wounding is, because we're treated like idiots when we're born, when in fact we're God.
You know, adults talk to kids. Oh, hi there, Martha.
Or worse, pretend the child,
Shut up.
baby can't understand.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I hate
Stop
doing
talking
this,
that
and
baby
I
talk.
don't know how I'm making it through, I never sleep. We understood it all,
Right.
and that was the wounding, and it, of course, happened to them, which is why they redid it as soon as we were born. Mothers and fathers repeat everything that happened to them. So it's what we want to become aware of, and honestly, especially every baby you see, mentally think it, but say out loud, I'm so glad you were born. I'm so excited to find out what you're here for. We really are waiting for you. We really are here to help you. Please don't just look to your family, look to everybody. You will see the babies respond. It's amazing.
Because they know.
They know, then they're appreciative. And we really, that we can make a big difference in our own world, because they really are our future.
I have one grounding story to that, and then I'm gonna go back to phosphorus, and then we'll end, because I think phosphorus is, I got this hit to talk about it for a minute. So I have another, it was the fourth person who reached out this week, a woman blast from my past, and she wanted to be lovers, but I was in another relationship. So it was back, there was a moment where she was, I want you to leave your partner and be with me. And I'm like, can't do that. So she had a kid a few months later with another guy. And this kid, I felt like it would have been my child, and we've been friends a long time. So when the kid's about 2 years old, she brings him over, I don't remember what we were doing, but I was eating, and he was just intently watching me. And I telepathically say, what are you doing, Keenan? And he's like, I'm eating your food with you, is what I got back.
Wow.
So he was inside my experience, tasting my food with me. So I started handing it up. I go, your mom doesn't know we're doing this. You know, so we were just telepathic communicating. And so I start doing some things in my mind, and him responding. And she's starting to look like, why has Keenan never done this before, Craig? And I'm like, well, I'm talking to him through my mind. And she was like, what? And so she mentioned that today. He's 14 now. And she had asked him about that. And he's aware of what happened even now. But he was inside my experience with me.
And again, the value of all of our interactions with babies is we give them a hook to hang their memories on. Think about when you've been ignored,
Yes.
the
Mhm.
experience is forgettable. But when you've been
Right.
paid attention to, it brings up all kinds of things, and you have all these connections. So we really, you just can't understate everything you do positively with all babies is helping us all. Because we need them to grow with awareness about community. We need them to feel that they've got somebody else to turn to, and especially even if you just hear a messed up mother or father screaming at or hitting a child. We've done too long of thinking it's none of my business. Boys and girls are never business. It's nothing to do with business. It is our life that's at stake. If we don't stand up for a boy or girl, child is the wrong word, being harmed, we are harming ourselves directly. And that is the hardest thing to overcome in the stupid way that our society is run. But we can and must. Super, super important. And just remember, you are that baby.
Well, that's the problem, is we're emotionally, maybe the advanced ones of us are emotionally 12 to 15. I consider myself about 12 to 15 emotionally with 30 years of work. I was in the 5 to 10, infant range prior to that. And, because what we're talking about, we don't even know we're stuck.
Yeah.
As George Carlin said, we have the illusion of freedom, right? We have this illusion that we're these free, enlightened, top of the heap evolutionary beings, when, in my opinion, we're the bottom of the barrel at this point, and we got to do some work to get back to where, thrive, right? The whole movie Thrive. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing here, is we gotta up our standards here, because every client that comes to see me says they eat healthy, even the ones with cancer.
Yeah.
And I said,
My
right?
parents used to say to me, kids don't have them. No wonder I have cancer.
It's a bad message to implant, right?
Yeah, got that one too.
So I'll take it back to the nutrition, then we'll end in a minute. So there's this, I was talking about calcification. So when you're in this calcification part, you've got to have your control elements that get calcium back in solution because it's precipitated because there's not enough these control elements to keep it in solution. So the worst thing you could ever do is have pasteurized dairy because the calcium has precipitated out of its protein complex. That's the difference between raw dairy and pasteurized dairy. So the calcium is controlled by phosphorus, and phosphorus is called the light bearer element. Calcium is like cement, like when it hardens, and phosphorus is like what makes the ocean glow. Phosphorescence is what makes fireflies glow. That's phosphorus. And it's a very bright and hot element. So it controls calcium by dissolving it. So this company, Standard Process, has a synthetic orthophosphoric acid liquid. It looks bright fluorescent yellow. And as the story goes, I had this guy that, I got all kinds of strange referrals, but this guy had bone spurs in his heels. Every time he walked, it was like walking on glass. And I knew his wife, and he came as a strong referral. And he, his thing was he partied too much because he had 2 kids, and so the mom kind of had a minimal girls' night out once a week, but he had his boys' night out once a week because he was the moneymaker, you know, and he got to go out. And so they were doing kratom and all kinds of cocaine, and this is all confidential. I can't mention the name, of course. And so I go, "There's your bone spurs, dude. You've been eating kind of poorly and not sleeping enough and doing drugs on the weekends. And so you got to do this, this, and this." So he was willing to do some of the diet stuff. He took the phosphorus. I gave him the Standard Process Boswellia complex, which is frankincense, ginger, turmeric, and celery seed, and it's concentrated through. And so a high dose of that sort of builds up the anti-inflammatory compounds. And so he's out of pain a little better 2 or 3 weeks later, because that's how long it takes sometimes. And 4 to 6 months later, his bone spurs were gone by taking faithfully the phosphorus, changing his diet a little bit, and then dissolve the calcium. So here's a connection that you'll never, ever see except from a weirdo like me, is the calcium phosphorus ratio is balanced in the blood by the thyroid and the parathyroid.
Say that one more time.
The calcium to the phosphorus ratio in the serum is regulated by the thyroid and the parathyroid. And there was endocrinology experts, doctors that used to, they would look at lab work, and that's why you always see calcium and phosphorus on most wellness panels in the blood work. Because the doctors don't do this anymore, but I do. It's like you divide the amount of calcium by the amount of phosphorus, and that ratio should be 2.5. And if it's not, then there's too much calcium, which is precipitating. And if it's too low, there's too much phosphorus and they're too hot. And the endocrine teachers used to teach this, that you can quickly get how good the thyroid, whether it's running hot or cold, by the calcium phosphorus ratio. So that's how important phosphorus is, but it's acid forming at the same time, phosphoric acid. So it needs to be controlled by calcium because calcium is alkaline. So they have a partnership. Then the other 2 elements that control calcium, anybody want to take a guess as I eat one of my livers here?
They control
What are the 2 elements that control calcium?
iron.
Nope.
Magnesium.
Magnesium.
Very good. Mhm.
That was a group one. I knew magnesium because when you go buy calcium, they want you to have magnesium, calcium together. They don't want you to,
Right.
yeah, to support each other.
Right, because they're antagonists.
Yeah.
And then what's the other one?
Phosphorus.
That's one. There's another one besides that. Phosphorus, magnesium, and there's one other one. Bernard Jensen spoke to it more than anybody, actually. You probably won't get it. It's an alkaline mineral, actually.
Not silica.
Sodium, yeah, sodium. You wouldn't think about that a whole lot. And so I was reading some of the primal diet stuff, Agenu's. Some of you know Agenu's work. You know, we want to live, primal diet. So he was anti-salt, completely anti-salt. That's completely dehydrating. And he recommended saltless cheese and saltless everything. And I was looking at like, okay, why would he say that? Because the Indians and the natives would travel, you know, hundreds and thousands of miles to go to the ocean and get salt and seaweed, you know. So I'm like, nah, he's off on something. And I realized why he was so off is because most people aren't going to go to the efforts to get the salt that I sell, right? The Celtic stuff. So I realized if you don't get good salt, you're fucking your cells up. Because there's too much sodium outside the cell, and the cell turns into a raisin. Because all the liquid in the cell goes out towards the sodium. But the Celtic sea salt, for example, the big size crystals of the Celtic salt, they're only about this big, but I got this really cool camera at one point, I took a picture of one of the grains, one of the Celtic salt crystals, and then I blew it up and it had all these green veins in it. And then I called them up and I said, you guys have algae in your salt. And she goes, oh yeah, that's why it's so good for you, because there's actually protein in those little algae veins in the crystals.
That's the same thing as with that kelp, or not the kelp, the algae, what is it called?
Remember, we're going to ask for
I'm
questions.
sorry.
So yeah, there's a lot of living salts out there, and that's why I recommend you get a solar dried salt, because it's still raw. Guess how much Morton iodized salt is heated up to?
Wow, they remove all of that.
Oh, this gets really good. The Codex Alimentarius stuff. This is this Codex Alimentarius stuff. 500, 550. And then they add dextrose to it
Oh, yeah.
to hold the synthetic iodine in it, because iodine likes to evaporate very quickly.
Right.
So they add dextrose, which is a form of sugar, in the salt and anti-kicking agents to hold it in there, and it doesn't have to be on the label.
Right.
So there's sugar in your Morton salt and it doesn't even have to be on the label. Isn't that fucked up? That is messed up.
After the salt, you knew of all the other minerals.
Well, that's the Codex Alimentarius, and that was developed long ago, where any salt shipped internationally had to be 98% sodium chloride. When in fact, natural sea salts are 85% sodium chloride. The next highest element is magnesium chloride in sea salt. So there's magnesium in naturally unrefined sea salt. And so,
What was the upside for that?
well, because the industry gets to take all those valuable trace minerals out of the salt and use them and feed the cattle the refined sodium chloride. You see, we're the cattle to them. All because there's trace amounts of gold and salt and silver, and they're taking all these valuable, very hyperconductive elements. Because how do you conduct electricity in the body with the right mineral base?
What about the pink Himalayan salt, like from Stavros Lake, the stuff that you get?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the tubs
Used
that I
to
have.
be.
The trouble with the Himalayan salt these days is there was a certified Himalayan salt by Peter Ferreira and his group back in the day. You had to leave, didn't you? And so they did an assay on the salt to see the contaminant levels. But most of the Himalayan salts now aren't from Himalayas anymore. They're from Poland and Eastern Europe and Pakistan, and you know, and they add pink dye to them. And so if you're getting your salt at Costco or Trader Joe's, you're not getting good quality pink salt. You know, so any salt I buy, if I can't see the assay of all the minerals and the contaminants, I'm not buying it. In today's world, are you kidding me? So the Celtic salt people publish an assay every year. You know, here's what's in our salt. I want to see transparency, don't you guys?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Transparency.
Where does your salt come
The shores of France. You know, they've been doing this for thousands of years. The Palladiers, they're called. They're salt. And they go up there and they rake the salt, and these are professional salt, you know, refiners. Like, wow, I don't want to do that. Sit there and rake salt around. And, you know, there are guys that do up in Northern
Sign me up.
California. They go up to these salt beds up in it would be like Humboldt County. This guy goes up there and he says the ocean water comes up into these like tide pools, and then it washes out, and then when it washes out, it dries. And he goes up there and he gets a little pick and picks off this beautiful looking salt, purple, bluish. Like, oh, he wouldn't tell me that, of course. Like, tell me where your spot is. He's like, are you kidding me?
I got that at Bean Hollow.
Bean
The reefs at
Hollow.
Bean Hollow. I
Yeah.
found some there when I was playing with
The
my kids.
reefs of Bean Hollow, that sounds like a great book.
Yeah.
There's a book title.
Salt there.
The beans that so that's when we get too much calcium, we get unclear. It's like a veil. I drank too much water that had calcium in it, some well water years ago, and my eyesight dropped by 10-20%
Wow.
over the course of about 2 years.
Jeez.
I've never been able to get it back. It was like this film of calcium in the water filmed over my retina or something. So that's why I have these on, actually. And yeah, so I could do a lot of phosphorus therapy. What happens do you think if you do a lot of phosphorus to dissolve everything in your body? What do you think is going to happen to your body?
Over dissolve.
Yeah. So what's that?
Jellyfish.
Osteoporosis, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cartilage.
The body will eventually, what happens is I've had clients that don't react well to the phosphorus, So what do you think the action, so it's warm and dry. That's the action of phosphorus in the body. So if you have a lot of heat already, right? If you have a hot liver already, that phosphorus is going to go right up into your head, right? My favorite Chinese term, liver yang rising. But you guys, you like that, Krista?
It's the
Liver
thing.
yang rising. It just sounds cool. Hey, dude, liver yang is rising, man. Because the liver likes to make heat. It's a heat producing organ. So if you see a really red face, a red head, then they generally have good liver heat. And my tongue's been getting redder and redder. So I got to talk to some acupuncturists about this. I got the whole yin deficient thing going a little bit. So you want to have, if you're giving phosphorus to a person, you want to give them an easily assimilatable form of calcium. So you don't, deplete your calcium store. So generally that's the standard process raw calcium wafers or the calcium lactate. Calcium lactate. That's an ionized form of calcium that it's literally, it doesn't precipitate in the body. And one of the mysteries of calcium, a lot of people don't realize, is that the immune system needs it. See the COVID recommendations? Fuck zinc, you need calcium. Your actual white blood cells can't function without ionized calcium and protein and vitamin C. Zinc is like, yeah, but it's not something in the acute stage. They're getting results, but if you give zinc without copper, see, why don't you just eat liver? Because liver has zinc and copper in the right ratios. See, that's the way out. You don't just give a bunch of zinc without copper. You give all the zinc and during the COVID stuff, and then you end up getting done with COVID. And what was the big thing with COVID? Hypoxia.
Right.
And what do the natural COVID recommendations do? Hypoxia. No, the vitamin C, the D3, all that crap, it causes hypoxia. I mean, we have a conspiracy within a conspiracy within a conspiracy. We are so gaslighted. It took me 5 years of study to get down to this level where I can even talk about this.
I mean, it's the blind leading the blind more, I would hope.
Even my colleagues, there are very few of us that know this stuff. More and more are waking up to Morley because you got to know this guy. You just have to know this, because if we don't understand how to control oxidative metabolism, we're going to burn ourselves up. And there's the whole Tai Yang, Xiao Yang thing, Krista, and the acupuncturist. When you don't control iron, like my serum iron levels are rising. That causes a lot of heat and oxidative damage. And then you see the manifestations of that all over the body, right? Heat toxins, right?
But that's not kind of.
Hey, validation.
Yeah, I'm gonna go check your light switches.
Good idea.
The spirits are out, bro.
Did I hear that too?
Yeah, that
It's
is
tripping me out,
sketchy.
bro.
That's a fan telling
The
us.
spirits are up.
You haven't been there until it goes off when you're in the back.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so we're gonna end this talk tonight then. So the final, the moral of the story is I've been telling people, if you get to know yourself enough, that's sort of the way out. So how do you get to know yourself enough? I like to challenge people. So sit down in a chair for a minimum of 5 minutes a day. Longer is better. And the only job to do that, set a timer and let everything be as it is. Let your thoughts alone, let your sensations alone. And it's the fastest way to get to know yourself is to sit in silence and not move and not go anywhere and just sit through the waves of discomfort, especially if you don't like yourself. Like, I like spending time with myself. I would prefer to be with myself most of the time, but because it's just so fucking entertaining just to sit in like the shit show in here all day. It's like, whoo, look at that thought. And my housemates hear me laughing to myself in my room all the time. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe that thought that just came through my field of consciousness. Like it's like a theater of fun all day long in here, you know? So, but if you don't like yourself, you see, then you sit with yourself. The point is to sit through the discomfort to get to the gold, because the discomfort will pass.
Hey, Craig, you're going to touch upon glutathione?
Thank you, Gary. That's the question part. So their question, we can take those now. So that's perfect, Gary. So glutathione, we got to this glutathione thing I've been learning about. So, you know, when you eat raw cabbages or raw onions or raw watercress or raw arugula, that spicy flavor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's sulfur in the form of a thing called a thiol. Thiol. Thiol.
Yep.
Spicy. So that's why when you cook these foods, the sulfur evaporates into the air. That's why it stinks when you cook cabbage or whatnot. That's the sulfur going off into the air and out of the vegetable. So that's why you lose that thiol component when you cook these foods, and you gain more. It's more earth element and less spicy, less fire. And then thiols turn into glutathione, which is energy. So if you have vata derangement, like some people, these sulfur-rich vegetables causes gas. They call that, these are vata foods in Ayurveda. All the cruciferous family, all the raw onions. So they say if you have too much wind in your system or your mind is all over the place, then you've got to fight through that to be able to eat these foods. It's kind of
Repeat the part, when you eat it, then the thiol turns into.
glutathione. See
Okay.
the common thing there's the thione part. So people they go the wrong route. They go N-acetylcysteine and all these precursor molecules. And the trouble is when you take this molecule in your body isn't going to use it as is. We think that this body's like an automaton. But you take in reduced glutathione or N-acetylcysteine, and the body just breaks it down with enzymes. But guess what? When they give you the chemical form of these, there's no enzymes. So you're more deficient in the long run with these chemical-based supplements.
So your body's not uptaking.
It doesn't have the enzymes to do so, it won't uptake it. It turns into waste.
Some sauerkraut?
So eat some raw veggies of this family and then see how you do. If you have a reaction, then that means you're detoxing probably.
And just as good.
It's great, yeah.
When it's fermented?
I don't know that answer to that. I know that there's some traditions that they generally frown on fermented foods like the old Vedic, but I don't agree with them at all.
Yeah, okay.
I think you need that flavor because sulfur is evaporative, right? Just like iodine is. So if you even leave onions out, right? If you leave onion out on the counter chopped up, it's going to get less spicy over time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know about hot peppers though. I would think a hot pepper, the compound that makes that spicy, I don't think it's a thiol. So if somebody wants to do some homework on that, I would be
think hot
fascinated.
peppers stay hot peppers when they dry out.
No, I'm talking about the thiol in there. Is it the same compound of spiciness and peppers that there is in these other things? Because peppers are viewed as a very, very extreme food in the traditions I've studied because they're nightshades. And the Solanaceae family has these toxins in them that interfere with mineral metabolism, which is why I had maybe tomatoes 5 times this summer as an experiment. And I had a much better summer than last summer. I had a lot of tomatoes and I had a bipolar mood summer. Yeah, nightshades really they can mess me up. So I try to stick with my program, which is basically meat and salads and veggies, and then less of the less stuff. And salsa's so nice though. It's fresh salsa, some peppers, and God, delicious. But the peppers are meant to grow in a hot climate, and tomatoes are meant to grow in a hot climate. So if it's hot outside, you get your fresh vine ripe tomatoes, then you should enjoy them. It's when you eat them in the middle of the winter as cooked tomato sauce that's kind of the problem. Because you're telling the body the action of tomato is cool down, cool down, cool down. In the middle of a freezing winter, it's not the appropriate sauce. A cooked pureed carrot marinara would be a more appropriate wintertime pasta sauce, which is in my recipe favorites. You take a bunch of carrots and a tiny little beet, boil them up, puree it, and the beet turns it bright red. You add enough apple cider vinegar and olive oil and all the Italian seasonings.
Brilliant.
And then you've got your carrot beet marinara. That's your wintertime marinara. That's appropriate for the winter, not this tomato bullshit. Agenews discovered actually that some people, they won't react to the yellow, the orange, or the red pigment in vegetables when it's raw. When you cook them, the body can have an allergic reaction to the cooked pigment in the cooked tomato versus the raw.
Wow.
And the cooked carrot versus the raw carrot, or the cooked squash, yellow squash versus the raw yellow squash.
Wow.
And so I tell people with allergies, this is how deep you have to investigate. You have to investigate all the way down to this level to really understand that all of you have 5 or 10 foods that are normal for other people, but that you're kryptonite and you don't know it. I know mine. Avocado, coconut, cucumber, squashes,
Avocado, chocolate, right?
chocolate, full kryptonite. Brain fog, low energy, digestive disturbances. You talk about the medical word I love, borbogymus. Borbogymus sounds in your gut.
Borbogymus.
So it makes
That's
sense.
a
Borborygmus.
Huh?
Borborygmus.
Thank you. Correct pronunciation. She has the correct pronunciation. Say that again.
Borborygmus.
Borborygmus. Thank you.
Borborygmus.
Borborygmus. That's even better. Borborygmus. I got borborygmus today from all my indulgence. So it's rumbling in the intestines.
Is
you
that
know?
onomatopoeia? When the words.
It kind of like it.
Borborygmus. So that's a great one. It's fancy. It sounds so cool, right? These liver yang rising and all these fancy words. You know, you sound like a real genius. Even if you don't know what they mean, you just sound kind of good. So Gary, then that's why you know, raw vegetables have the associated enzymes to make the glutathione molecule. But if you take reduced glutathione or N-acetylcysteine, there's no enzymes in there, and enzymes run everything, including our thinking. You see, so if you take synthetic B vitamins from coal mining waste, you guys don't know that on the call, and neither do you, Ian, but all your synthetic B vitamins you're buying are made from coal mining waste by the pharmaceutical industry.
Motherfuckers!
99% of the B vitamins out there are made of the same thing that's going in the chemtrails.
Ugh.
Look at the label, it says USP.
Yeah, you see USP on a B vitamin label, that means United States Pharmacopoeia. Hidden in plain sight. Hidden in plain sight.
Oh, you know, it didn't sound bad
United
10 years
States
ago when we didn't
Pharmacopoeia,
understand that
USP.
pharmacopoeia was so bad, but now. we understand.
Wait, there's too many conversations. The poor people aren't gonna be able to hear. So I'm gonna finish this up in a second. So we wanna realize is that enzymes run everything. And people studied this 60, 70 years ago. And that's why I use the supplement companies I do, because they give you the vitamins with the whole phytochemical matrix and the enzymes still intact. It's like taking apart a watch and taking out a few of the springs and then putting the watch back together and thinking the watch is gonna work.
So standard processing includes the enzymes?
Because it's from food. See, they're not trying to outsmart anybody at this company, you know. They're just trying to mimic normal physiology, as the said slogan. So their digestion products are not trying to megadose you, they're just trying to get your digestion back to normal. When you got kidney products, they're trying to get your kidneys desludged and back to normal. They're not trying to outsmart nature, like the 5-hour energy guy with 4,000 times the RDA of thiamine, B1. Guess what that does to your poor nerve cells? It fries them like a nuclear holocaust is what it does. Because B1 has a fat soluble control factor, a water fire thing called vitamin B4. You guys have heard this so many times. That's only in the whole food version. And see, so when you give B1 or thiamine in large amounts without the yin part, the control factor, the fat soluble activator part, then you literally have fire with nothing for the fire to burn but your own tissues. And I see people that are on long-term on those monster drinks, these 5-hour energies, and look in their sclera and their iris, and they have all the signs of fried nerves. And so it's like, if you don't have energy, that's the equation back there is to look at, and caffeine doesn't give you more energy. It's a poison stimulation because caffeine's a poison. Plants make it so they don't get eaten by bugs. That's what caffeine is. So I'm on, 400 milligrams today. I'm all poisoned up, but it works.
It's always said caffeine borrows energy from your future, like your adrenals.
That's right. It does.
Yeah.
If you're conscious about it, you can play the game a little bit like me, but I'm still at risk. I'm definitely, I do this little thing all day. It's like when my joints are popping, it's like, oh, I'm dehydrated, right? Right here. This is my sign, If I can't do this, then I got clients, they can only go this fucking far. See, if you can't go 90 degrees,
Really?
if you can't go 90 degrees, you're too
What's
calcified. See, you should be able to go like that, 90 degrees.
I know. God.
See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
90, like,
Oh, well, 90 degrees like that.
That's dehydration.
So dehydration.
Oh, so I'm
Wait,
gonna end on,
Where's the 90 degrees? Here or here at
Is
the
it
wrist?
here?
Yeah, there you go.
And
Wow,
the-
look at that.
and
No,
the
right there with the
fingers.
fingers mold.
see, 90 degrees.
I'm not even.
That's standard process over 10, 11 years.
No,
Is it the
And lots of
No,
yoga.
it's a
Wrist
finger.
too, yeah, wrist too, see, 90-degree wrist.
Yeah.
But that's a separate
Add
one.
the fingers. Oh, boy, I-
Having lots of fun
Right
here
up.
tonight.
Zero.
Okay, I'm gonna end on this because I just gotta end. So I have a machine over here, because some of you have seen it, the AquaCure electrically expanded water machine. It makes literally a plasma state of water. So I was farting around with this, and the guy that makes the machine says he turns water that's H2O into HHO, into the ions, right? And so hydrogen, I was messing with this hydration thing and the word hydrogen, and I was like, is hydrogen what hydrates us? Is hydrogen, hydrate? I was like, been thinking about that the last few weeks. Like, so the water part, so it's the hydrogen in the water is what hydrates us, not the oxygen.
Right, that sounds.
That makes sense,
right
doesn't
to
it?
me.
So I was like, so people use this machine and they blow the hydrogen gas onto their sore joints
They hydrate themselves.
and the joint pain goes away. So the theory is it's hydrating the dehydrated joint.
Wow.
Oh.
Not astounding?
Okay, that sounds simple.
This machine makes hydrogen gas. You can put it up your nose, you can put it on your, we've got little gloves, you can put the gas through a glove into just an isolated area.
That's so cool.
And
Tooth pain,
tooth pain,
it's good for diabetes.
the longer the better, you know, the longer, because I keep saying the last thing I'm going to say. So Morley used to say, was we started the night with this actually, is that there's no such thing as disease. There's only energy deficiency that cause disease at this mitochondrial level. So if you have enough energy in your mitochondria, you'll never get ill. And what are the hospital people, the Rockefeller medicine people doing? They're shutting down that energy factory. So you can be a victim of low energy, anaerobic, cancer-ridden, because cancer, fungus, viruses, and Epstein-Barr, they're all related to shape-shifting bugs. Biopleomorphs that change their shape and form based on your terrain. Biopleomorphism means shape-shifting microorganisms that can cloak themselves and change shape and form based on need. There's your Lyme, there's your mystery illnesses. That's the stuff that no one wants to talk about because they don't want to face the mystery of having to do deep detective work with these people. I have 2 new Lyme cases just came in. And one guy, I just talked to him for an hour. He's a young man, I got him straightened out right away. A couple of things he was doing that were real simple. He inflamed his joints and I'm like, it's like, oh, fuck, I was eating too much cheese. Yeah, that'll cause the Lyme flare up. Too much stress with the girlfriend. Yeah, that's causing that. And then it came down to this last, I mean, I could go on and on for hours, but I had this conversation with him because I got a hit to ask him. I said, so another way you deplete your energy that most men don't realize is ejaculating too much. And apparently he had been. And that caused part of the flare up was his life force shrink, you know. And so there's ways that men are taught to separate ejaculation from orgasm. And that's kind of the basis of semen retention, where you can become multi-orgasmic because you're not blowing a load every time you reach climax. And we're not taught that. You know, men are kind of taught like, oh, one and done kind of thing, but that is not what our destiny should be, because the ladies need, okay.
What?
The ladies need to be lit up like a Christmas tree, and then the smart male lights the lady up like a Christmas tree, and then he basks in the light. That's a smart man. The stupid man is selfish, and he gets none of that Christmas tree light.
Great book. She comes first.
Is that a real book?
It's a book.
There's a book called She Comes First, Monica said. So all the men should read that, right?
Please.
Yeah. The men's group topic, there we go. Very good topic, yeah. I have a men's group that goes meets every other week, so that's a great men's group topic. Pleasing the woman first, right?
I think men are trying to learn. They're all the time, they're asking questions.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, anything you want on camera? Because we're still on camera, folks. You want to ask questions that you want on camera or anything else? You guys, Krista, Felicia, anything? Last chance.
Well, I've got, so what?
Oh, Gary has a question. Okay, we'll get Gary's question. That's good to have it on
So
film.
what's the importance of the glutathione? Somebody, I read on.
Energy production.
So energy, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
energy production. Okay.
Yeah.
From onions.
Yeah, it's from onions and whatnot. So
Garlic
thanks, Krista. Thanks, Felicia. We're here every
Thank you, Craig.
Craig.
That was awesome. It was hilarious and super interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna turn off the recorder. We can still talk, but I'll